Well, hey everyone, and welcome to episode number 3 of our new series, Really Bad Security. I'm thrilled today to have Bill Hallett and Drew Hunter from ProofPoint with us. Bill, hopefully I said your name correctly there.
Absolutely, you nailed it. Thank you
All
very
right, good.
much.
I got it. Yes. With me, as always, is Lloyd from the CSA and myself, Matt Nelson. What we are going to talk about today, given the fact that it's October, right, is security awareness training. But having listened to kind of all sides of the argument, for and against training and programs and all of that stuff, what we really wanted to talk about today is the what can happen if you don't have a formalized security awareness training program in place, and how not training your users is really, truly, really bad security. So with that, Bill, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. And then after that, I think the first thing that I would like to do is tell us some of the horror stories that you've seen from people not being trained, from organizations where you've seen not have good security awareness in place, and some of the ramifications of that.
Sure. Thanks very much, Matt. Again, my name is Bill Hallett. I'm happy to be here. And for those of you who don't know, I was with a company called Wombat Security Technologies, and we were a global security awareness training company that focused on security awareness training. We came out of Carnegie Mellon University. And then ProofPoint, about 2.5 years ago, it's 2 years in March, acquired us to have an integrated approach to security awareness training. So they integrated us into their security and compliance platform. And most of you are probably familiar with ProofPoint, but in a nutshell, we're a global leader on email security. And we also have threat intel that includes looking at probably close to 25% of the world's email traffic from a security standpoint too. So there's a very, very valuable threat intel library that we take advantage and integrate into our security awareness training. So in a nutshell, we can say who's getting attacked by what, and then get a prescriptive training approach on that versus just kind of guessing on what people need to be trained. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to give you a framework where I came from and how we approach. So Matt, you also mentioned you want to take a look at some of the horror stories, maybe some examples, right?
Yeah.
So
examples, horror stories.
Right, in October, right? Very appropriate too. So I know every one of us has an example of probably the Amazon email that we got on our iPhone or Droid or something like that. It looked fairly real, and they want you to click on something, and that's the classic bait, right? But I'll give you an example just to frame up what the current landscape looks like, since it's such a relevant topic now. Everybody is confronted with moving into a remote workforce. And obviously the COVID topic is so relevant right now. And I don't want to talk about that just for the sake of talking about it, but when I look at our threat intel that we see, and we know who's getting attacked by what on a global basis, we have seen just a magnificent transition into that as the focused topic. I mean, I know that sounds completely obvious, but we track 24 threat actors across the world, from state-sponsored actors to financially backed threat actors. These are the bad guys that are after corporations, us as individuals. And then we have some sophisticated regional ones that we look at too, that maybe are just after 2 or 3 people within an organization for some specific data that those people might have access to, right? Some valuable information too. So for what we've seen this year is not necessarily waterfall of increased attacks, but it's a different kind of attack now, and it's a much more focused attack, right? So that's why we look at the end user as a critical piece of the security of the company, which is what Matt wants to talk about today, that security awareness training. So if you look at 3 pillars of security, you look at protecting the people from those inbound threats, especially in a remote workforce now based on email security. So if you have that covered, you're fairly well insulated, but something will inevitably get through. So that takes you into the second pillar of security awareness training and making those end users who are the main targets. Now remember, 94% of our breaches that we see are email based, right? So those threat actors are trying to get that end user to click on something, to enter something, to open an attachment, basic stuff, but that is substantiated by the data we see, 94%. Right? So that second pillar is making people aware of that, making people aware of those types of things. And then the third pillar is really protecting that internal data that people are creating and access, especially with remote workforces now too. So there's so many different access points. If you look at like an O365 or cloud migration, the other things you as customers or security teams are looking at now, migrating into the cloud, that's probably an accelerated effort that you have now too. So you have all those balls in the air trying to protect those things. And those threat actors are very, very, very good at taking advantage of those security holes in those cloud-based environments, because now they're taking a look at not just necessarily using infrastructure, but using your own infrastructure based on compromised accounts. And it's an infrastructure that you probably trust as a security team or a customer. So I'm getting a little off topic here, but that's really what the environment that we see right now. So an example would be at the beginning of this year, we saw the World Health Organization was a huge brand for obvious reasons. They were trying to get information out for the pandemic. They didn't have their email authenticated. So there was a big push to have that switched, and they eventually did that. But that was a huge template rush that we saw coming in through our email gateways, and we'd catch that. But that was a huge theme that we saw. Then it migrated into COVID. Then it migrated into, compensation for stimulus packages and everything too. I'm sure we're going to see election things coming up now and second stimulations. But every one of those 24 threat actors, we've never seen it before. They all jumped on that bandwagon, right? So there's countless horror stories there. But let me take you back to one that happened prior to COVID and everything too, because it was a human nature. And this is on YouTube. You can look it up for more detail too. It's Alcoa, which is Aluminum Company of America. It's kind of like the U.S. Steel of aluminum. They're based in Pittsburgh, global, huge enterprise company. So as security awareness kind of came into being several years ago and more people were adapting it, Alcoa was one that their senior leadership said, hey, our end users have nothing to do with security. Kind of a foreign concept now, right? But that was really the take several years ago. And they pushed back, we don't need this at all. Well, one of the foreign, state-sponsored actors had found 4 people that had access into very, very specific proprietary information, valuable information from the engineering team. Long story short, they conducted a campaign, targeted 4 people. One of those persons clicked on a URL. They downloaded a payload that sat dormant for about a month. It was programmed to wake up in a month, compromised the entire financial team, compromised the specific proprietary information that they were after. You can imagine how valuable that information is for a global aluminum company, right? Trademarks and things like that, and sent that information back. And Alcoa, after they did the forensics research on it afterwards, realized they didn't even know about that for 6 weeks, right? Multi-billion-dollar breach. It was in the news. You probably don't remember it now. It's about 6 years ago, but it's the whole story. And the CISO talks about it. And the point being there, kind of the nightmare was that leadership mindset was, our network's safe, everything's bulletproof, we're good, we have proprietary stuff in here, we have stuff that the DoD is looking at, there's no way anybody can get through. And that's what the attackers had migrated to, that approach of a people approach years before most of security teams have understood that and looking at that now. I mentioned 94% of those breaches that we see are email based. They don't care about the network anymore. They don't care about the perimeter is people, right? And that's, probably everybody knows that. But I'll summarize this real quick. So what we see from a definition of the kind of the landscape, it's human targeted, right? We're targeting people as a threat actor. We want that human to activate something. It's human activated, meaning clicking on something, opening something, entering information. And it's also human operated. That's another big thing that we've seen in 2020 is there's actually human adversaries on the other end of those threats. In 2019 and 2020, of probably 25 different threat topics that we saw, only one was a software-based threat. The others are all operated by people. And it goes back to that cloud environment. There's actually somebody on the other side operating that threat. So I know I talked a lot about that, but hopefully that kind of frames it up for you, Matt. Does that help?
No, I think that's perfect. So a couple of things. One that I want to throw out there, I think we have forever had a bit of this view of, the bad actors or the hackers being, some teenager in his mom's basement that's goofing around on something. But I think when you talked about the 24 organizations that you're following and some of the regional ones, something that I've been trying to talk about a lot lately is to understand the financial backing that some of these, these are actual organizations now, right? This isn't just random people out there trying to hack stuff. These are companies or government sponsored groups that are, have a lot of resources in place to be able to do some of these very advanced techniques, which is, I think, why you can see some of them sitting there forever. The thing that I've noticed lately is that hackers have become incredibly patient. And it's no longer like, I'm going to try to break through the firewall and I got to get in before all the systems find me. It's, I'm going to find my way in through an email or some other way. I'm just going to kind of sit there and wait and watch and see what's happening. So I do think that, are you guys, am I right in saying that? Are you guys seeing that a lot of this stuff, especially maybe for bigger companies, is coming from, very well-funded organizations?
No, we do see the regional ones, the smaller ones that are after some, they do some social media and they might be after one person. However, to your point there, this is a top 10 economy, a global top 10 economy is breaches and hacking and, going after this stuff. And your point, it's a mix of state sponsored, it's a mix of heavily financially backed, not necessarily government connected, but financially backed. And then you have those, those regional ones that are fairly sophisticated that way too, and they can be patient. And I mentioned before that we haven't seen this big tsunami rise in amount of attacks. We've actually seen a decrease in number of attacks, but much more sophisticated, much more focused, and much more detailed too. So that lends to another point about security awareness. After you kind of taking care of that email security at the front end and defending against those email threats, to be able to define your end users internally, to know who is susceptible for an attack that might get through based on who fails a security awareness training test or who fails a phishing campaign, then who also who is getting attacked. Like our email security tool will through we call it a very attacked person report. So we'd able to say, hey, Bill Hallett's getting bombed with malicious URLs this month for some reason. We need to stop that. But then we also need to get him educated on that topic, right? So that becomes a more specific approach to it, more prescriptive approach to it too. So you're defining the internal end users, who's susceptible, who's getting attacked, and then you can train them on those specific threats instead of just guessing on what people need to be trained on. Now we've taken it and transformed it into using that threat intel and having a prescriptive approach.
So that leads me perfectly into my next question, being that it is October and Security Awareness Month, and a lot of organizations are looking at doing some sort of security awareness training. So it's kind of a two-part question. The first part of it is, tell us about what a successful security awareness training in the month of October would look like, types of things that organizations should be covering. And then beyond that, I want to talk a little bit about, a security awareness program that goes beyond October into the rest of the year. But specifically, if a company right now is trying to put together something to educate their end users on for this month, what are some recommendations that you would have in terms of how to make that be the most successful it can be?
A current one now that we have is something as simple but as very critically important as passwords. We have password modules. That's a fundamental topic that we want to educate end users on. The other one that follows quickly behind is, just because it's such a dynamic and relevant topic, is more the awareness of what type of attacks are coming in. Like we have templates, real world templates that those threat actors are actually sending into, trying to get through the email gateways. We take those and farm them out. We have them in the platform. We've used that with a lot of our customers just to say, hey, not necessarily a full-blown training module, but it's more of an awareness thing to say, here's what is happening. Here's what's coming in. Here's what every threat actor is sending at every company, right? Because, World Health Organization is trying to get information. Your HR department is trying to get information to you as well, too. Like, when are we reopening? When can we expect this type of thing? We've seen a lot of it where, hey, Bill Hallett came down, he's positive for COVID, or see who is positive for COVID in your organization. And that's evil, brutal stuff, right? But
Yeah.
we've seen that common. So just an awareness thing like that. We have quick little 1 minute or 2 minute. That's kind of the short term. Hey, have your guard up, especially if people are working from home and have kind of adapted that. Those are key ones too. Social media is another big one too, because those threat actors, probably saying something you already know, are using social media as target and stuff to make it really friendly. And once they've compromised an account in a cloud-based email system, it's extremely easy to compromise my account and send it to you, Matt, making it look like,
Yep.
hey, check out this new set of wheels I got for my car, right? Basic stuff, but that's prevalent. So in the comment, that most of the end users are not having security. I know you and I were talking about this a little while ago, Matt. You made a great point. They're trying to craft POs and do stuff in accounting and legal teams and everything too.
And
They might not have,
manufacturing.
they shouldn't, right? It's unfair to expect them to have security at top of mind. I mean, I know I didn't before I got into security 10 years ago. It was completely different. So those types of things in the short term. In the long term, as you embark on our philosophy for a very successful program, is to have a continuous program. What I mean by that is not like a compliance-based approach where you have a once a year event of training and you watch an hour's worth of videos that you can click on 5 different browsers and go walk your dog, and the administrator and the company knows that you started it and you stopped it and you don't have any idea how effective it is, right? So our approach has always been, even in the Wombat days, we came out of a higher education, out of Carnegie Mellon. So we had a big emphasis on learning. So it's 5-minute interactive training sessions, or we do have video content now, but it's still very interactive. And it doesn't let you just go through the video and do it. It makes you interact with that video and stop and pause. And so you understand the concept, but we recommend, once a month, once a quarter, to have some kind of an event. Either it's an awareness event, like I talked about, getting those templates out, or a training event, or an assessment to see who's susceptible. Maybe it's a phishing campaign, or maybe it's a 10-question quiz on malicious URLs. If a person fails, then they would take that training. Then it's front of mind, and it's more of a culture change. So short term, that's the first piece, and then the philosophy of an ongoing aware. And now I'm kind of going backwards, but then it starts from leadership to be able to sit down with the end users and really convey a culture change and a behavior change. Because I look at a lot of these implementations, especially if you're embarking on it now, it's a culture and an organization change, especially like in that Alcoa example. If the leadership didn't look at it and the CISO didn't look at the end users as part of the security team, if I was an end user, I wouldn't consider, hey, it's IT's fault, right? It's IT's problem. I don't have anything to worry about. So that message has to be conveyed effectively and productively at the beginning of that. Or if you're in the middle of something, it's something you can pause and make it more productive. So they realize that 94% of the breaches are caused by an end user clicking on something. I don't know how many end users actually know that. Probably a very, very few percentage, small portion of the common end user. They probably don't know that, right? So that is an eye opener, right? Yeah. So they need to be conveyed that message and then understood that, hey, now I understand I'm part of the security of this company. I need to take my training seriously. I need to be aware. If I'm working from home, I need to convey this to my kids because it's going to hit you at home and at work. So hopefully that wasn't too long of a rambling answer, but I kind of backed into a successful program as we see it.
No, that was all spot on. Some stuff that I want to unpack inside of that, though. One, okay. I do find it amazing that in 2020 we are still talking about passwords, but that is still like the number one thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to yeah, I think you made some great points there about your security awareness training. It has to be relevant, and make sure, I think there a lot of times can be some very generic security awareness training. And that's the stuff where you're bored 2 minutes in, you click and go walk your dog or get another cup of coffee or whatever, and come mm-hmm. back to take what is oftentimes a quiz that pretty much, my 6-year-old could pass. So I think making it relevant to your organization, because different companies, different types of companies can certainly experience different types of attacks, depending on. And I think that making it real for people. That's why I wanted to talk a little bit about some horror stories at the beginning, was because I think sometimes security, and we as security folks have done a really good job of keeping this all like secret, right, over the years. But people, I think, need to know, hey, if I click on the wrong link, it could not just be something bad. It could literally be the end of the company, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
here in Michigan, we've recently, over the last year or so, we've had some smaller companies. So it's, again, they're not just targeting huge organizations. We've had some small businesses that have literally closed the doors because of a ransomware attack. So I think all that stuff is important. I'm super happy that you brought up the fact that we cannot just do this in October and then expect everyone to be security smart for the rest of the year. As I had mentioned earlier, if I was given an hour and a half training once a year on how to do POs and then told to go do a bunch of POs, I would fail miserably at that.
Right.
So
It's a
I think
good
the
point,
fact
Lloyd.
that that's our expectation of our end users, I'm definitely one that believes that we are sometimes way too hard on our end users, and expecting them to to know things that, again, not top of mind at all. Um, uh, Also, don't well, security awareness training and a security awareness program, even more so, is really good security, and not having one is really bad security. I think it should also not give companies an out, right, to not make the investments in the other tools and solutions and things that they need to have in place. You can't go, hey, I showed people a video, we're good for the next 12 months, right?
Right. Yeah, that would be foolish. Right. Yeah.
So,
And I think companies are still doing that. What we see, I keep going back to 94% because that's the absolute number one threat vector is that email, right?
yeah,
So,
number.
however, there's a big imbalance in still in security spend. There's about 10% of security spend is on email security. So there's still an abundance of spend on network and other things. So companies are still spending, as you know, I mean, just made that point, but backing it up with the metrics, they're still spending on that. But we're seeing a trend the other way where, okay, we need to be the most effective, and the quickest, most economically effective way to do that is make sure you have an email security, a good solid one up front, and spend your money on that 94%, that email threat. But obviously I'd be foolish to say, just like your point, you have to have a secure network as well too, but just being aware of that number one vector, you need to put the appropriate funds and effort into that as well. Right, I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Lloyd, can you talk a little bit about security awareness training in the real world? Maybe some stuff that you're seeing happen and/or feedback. You're the only one in this group that lives in the real world. That's why.
No, that's that's fair. Yeah, I agree that doing it as a just an annual requirement, it doesn't really help, in the overall scheme of things. Being more targeted, being more mindful. I'd even like to see it where if you're going to attend a conference, even virtually, that you're required to take like a 5-minute compliant or security awareness quiz just to say, hey, look, you're going to an event. And since this is really bad security, I'll be honest, I got dinged by the fish, in our internal campaign because I was at Ignite and hey, that looked very legit, like a Microsoft. I'm in a hurry. I'm bouncing between these virtual events, and yeah, so having like a targeted, that your IS team is going to be attending some big conference or big event at the end of the year. Maybe give them a little quiz before they go. Maybe just kind of give them a little refresher, or just make it required for everybody in your organization, especially your bigger fishes, to take some sort of awareness before they go. And then yeah, doing it ongoing, doing it quarterly, I think is great. I think we're getting a lot better. What I'm seeing out there is that the phishing attempts when we're doing our internal campaigns, not just where I am today, but from other people I've talked to, are getting much more sophisticated. They're looking much more legitimate illegitimate, if that makes sense. Like the emails aren't just very obvious misspellings with a bad URL in it.
I was just
that
gonna say
anybody
they're
could
finally
see.
using spell check on these
Yeah,
emails.
so they're getting much better. They're getting much more difficult if you're in a hurry to see, especially if you're somebody who's very busy, has a lot of reports. You're just gonna be like, okay, yep, click it. So yeah, I think this is all great stuff, all stuff we should continue to focus on.
See, I think the key of some of what we're saying there is people, right, in general are good and want to do the right thing, and they want to do the right thing in their job, and they want to do the right thing for their company. So it should really be on, leadership and the security teams to not just have a passive once a year type of, hey, we checked our checkbox, right? And we talk about how bad it is to just check off checkboxes. Well, security awareness training is another checkbox that shouldn't just be that. If you, I'm of the belief that if you give people, the tools and the education and the understanding, maybe more so, of why it is that they're doing and how this is a good thing for their organization, people are really going to try to do the right thing. Now, again, stuff is still going to happen, right? I would imagine that those of us on the call right now have probably clicked on something that we shouldn't have at some point. Lloyd, you already admitted it.
I did.
I too will
I'll own it.
confess that I have done that once or twice.
We have can I tell a quick story, not to interrupt you?
Yeah, please.
So when we were Wombat, right, we outgrew an office building and we were moving into another office building too. It's a great business problem, right? So HR sent out an email and said, hey, click on we have pictures of the new office. And if you hovered over the link, it said, this is a Wombat email, don't click on it. But it was, we overwrote it. And we had a 72% click rate from people that live security awareness training every day, right? So I did not click on it. I was on a plane traveling, I warned. But anyway, that's as easy as it can happen, right? And my wife worked for a small nonprofit. They got dinged for $5,000 in the classic Amazon gift card thing too. And that's a small, that's a huge penalty to a company. That's a nonprofit with 100 employees. You'd think they wouldn't be a target. So those things happen all the time. I interrupted you, Matt, but I had to tell that.
No, please. I like it when I like it when other voices are talking because I get sick of hearing my own. Well, I think this has been a fascinating conversation. I think as we're going through October, and folks out there, as you're looking at doing security awareness training for your end users, remember to make not only the October security awareness training be smart and relevant and useful, but to ensure that you have a full security awareness program in place that goes from October to October, and not just once a year. Doing anything else is really bad security. So with that, Bill, I really appreciate you and ProofPoint doing this for us. Bill is also going to be presenting at our October Ween event coming up, which is going to be awesome. I can't wait
I'm looking
for
forward
that
to that.
event.
I love the name right off the bat. It's great. I'm looking forward to that event.
We've got some great stuff lined up for it. So again, Bill, Lloyd, Drew, thank you very much. For everyone that's watching this, please do the like and subscribe and share and all that fun, 20-something YouTube stuff that I'm too old to understand, but please do it anyways. And we'll see you again for episode number 4. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Bye.